Welcome to everybody. I see we have quite a spread of people right from our hometown in McCann at Rhodes University. We've got lots of people from Stellenbosch, but we also have people from many other universities, Walter Sisulu, UJ, all the way from Cornell University with iSlice. Welcome, Matthias. We've got some of our NGO partners with us, CBUT, and I hope I haven't forgotten anybody else, but it's lovely to have such a spread of people join us this afternoon. So with me, I have a panel of students who have had lots of experience in community engagement in our Rhodes University Engaged Citizenry programs, and I'll explain a little bit about those programs in a minute. But we're going to try and keep the conversation quite rich for about an hour, and we'll leave some time for actual discussion towards the end if anybody would like to stay and chat with the panelists as well. I will also be keeping track of the meeting chat. So if you would like to ask questions as they arise, either for a specific panelist or just broadly what you're thinking about, please pop them in the chat function. I'll try track them as we're discussing, so I can include them in the conversation as we go along. But really what today is about is looking at graduate attributes, community engagement, and really personal development and how that contributes to building up society. So we're going to be looking at the full range of things, right from values and attitudes to practice and knowledge and skills that graduates feel they needed when they needed to go into the real work world. So we've got a variety of people with us. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but we've got everybody from corporate business to academia to the health sector, and right through their degree, these students have had experience in community engagement, and all of them have been leaders in one or more of our programs at Rhodes University. So they are very experienced, and it's lovely to have them with us. And I think it's also really inspiring as we lead up into the Rhodes University Community Engagement Awards to really listen deeply and learn from people who have won this award before and are now well into their careers as young adults. So I'm going to start with just letting everybody introduce themselves, what they're doing now, their names, and what programs you were involved in as a student. So shall we start with you, Sesona?
All right, thank you so much, Anna. Hello, everyone. My name is Sesona Yedwa. I work in the HR space, and I'm a graduate from Rhodes, having graduated up until master's in research psychology. And at the moment, I work in the HR space, and I also coordinate programs for training and developing students, and also do recruitment and other talent related or talent acquisition and talent management related functions. At Rhodes, I was involved in a lot of community engagement work, starting as a volunteer at Ncula, where I was involved in tutoring and mentoring. And then I was also involved in the space of volunteering or working with local early childhood centers, development centers in Makanda, where I worked, coordinating various programs in that space. So I've also been a residence community engagement leader. I've been in multiple spaces. We have participated as an active citizen at my time at Rhodes. Thank you.
Thanks, Sesona. And then Claire, if you don't mind introducing yourself and what you're doing at the moment and your community engagement experience.
Of course, and thank you, Anna, for such a warm introduction to the space. I might be the black sheep amongst everyone here today in that I haven't actually managed to leave for the real world. I'm still in the university space, haven't been able to say goodbye to that yet. So I'm still studying. I was a student at Rhodes University up until master's level. I am now doing my PhD at the University of Oxford, which will actually be on community engagement and which is funded by the Rhodes Scholarship. I spent a lot of time in the high school space while I was at Rhodes University. So initially in what was called the Student Volunteer Program, it's now the Engaged Citizenry Program at the university. I worked a lot with GADRA Education NGO and later was introduced to the 9/10s program, the high school mentoring program, which is where I spent most of my time. In fact, one of the other panelists today was my leader when I first joined the program. And after some time, I also became a leader in the program. I was also fortunate to be the CE rep for the Mountain Club in kind of the fateful 2020 COVID year and learned a lot through that process. And I'm just excited to be here today and learn from everyone too.
Thanks so much, Claire, for sharing your experience. I see we have Monica with us. Monica is in rural KZN. I'm going to let her introduce herself. She unfortunately can't use camera just to help a little bit with the bandwidth, but I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Monica, what you're doing currently, and what community engagement programs you were involved with during your student years.
I'm so sorry, the network is so bad here. So I had to switch off my camera, but yeah, I'm really excited to be here today. Hope everything goes well. My name is Monica Mathebula. I'm currently a pharmacist intern in KZN. I was involved in programs, specifically Budding Q, which was my pride and joy. And I was also doing a few community projects in my res at Sesona House and Humasigela in general. So I was involved in that, and I'm currently also still involved in helping the community in my area as well. So I'm really excited to share my thoughts and my experiences and skills that I've gained as well, that have contributed to my life and my career path currently. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Monica. So as you can see from all these different students, I'm going to call you students, although some of you aren't at the moment, but you can see that many of them have had a variety of experiences in different programs. So at Rhodes University, our programs are highly structured in the sense that they are quite focused around very specific goals that are defined between the community partner and the university coordinators. And we also have quite a rigorous process of training. That's usually through short courses that are accredited through Rhodes University, and students have to work through those with their student leaders. So many of these panelists that have been with us have had to work in training roles, have had to work in liaison roles with community partners and staff at RUS. Many of them have had to work directly with community partner young children, and right from early childhood and, as you can hear, up to high school and matric learners. And many of those that are in those matric programs have even continued their relationships beyond the prescribed program limits into fostering those relationships once they enter university. So a very broad and rich experience of community engagement, what many people would understand as volunteerism, but at Rhodes we've conceptualized it much more deeply as engaged citizenry. And that is to reflect the values and the culture of how these programs run. And I really hope that that is what's reflected as we go through this webinar today around the depth of relationships, the benefits that accrue to many different people in these programs, and the learning, the deep learning that happens through these experiences. So as you were all speaking, I know it's not a question that I prepared you for, but I would like to know from one or two of you, you've all had experiences in multiple different programs, or with multiple different community partners. What kept you so engaged in the programs, and what motivated you to maintain such a relationship over a long period of time? Many of you expressed being in one program for almost your whole degree. I mean, some of you for your whole degree. What kept you in that space so enthusiastically? I'm not sure if there's anyone that wants to grab the mic first.
I'll grab it.
Sure.
I started budding Q from first year, so 2020. So it's been something that I've done from the beginning. And I feel one of the reasons I stayed was in terms of my passion for community engagement in general. But I think once I actually joined, there was that sense of, I felt community engagement was just about giving, donating, and there's actually a bigger need for people like us, you know? So it's about teamwork. So if you have teamwork, you're able to bring a sense of hope and a sense of belonging to people. So I felt like, okay, cool, this is where I definitely belong, because I was able to give back to the community in a different way that I didn't think was possible. So I continued because I felt like there was so much growth that came from me as well, in general, from just being in the community and helping in different ways, and not just the idea of donating clothes or donating food parcels, but actually using my skills that I had gained from trainings, and also the passion that I had that was incorporated. And that's why I felt that there was so much growth in me that I just continued. But yeah, I think definitely the reason why I stayed was from the skills that I got and how it built me as a person in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that concept of belonging. And I think that's something that we see with many of our undergraduate students who come into community engagement programs, who really feel like they've found something, a passion or a vision that they can connect to, and how we as students have to, as leaders, have to nurture that. Would anyone else like to share? I see Sam's joined us. I'll let her introduce herself in a moment. But would anyone else like to share what kept them engaged and motivated to sustain their commitment?
Yes, and I think just to build from what Monica shared, I also share the similar sentiments, in the sense that I came from a background of, you know, giving, and came into the space initially with that savior mentality, that you here to make the difference, you here to change the situation, help people out. And obviously, as soon as we got into the program, there was training, there was the unlearning process unfolded, because we were taught that these are not the principles that we'll be operating or will be using during the process. And as time went on, I moved from that to more relationship building, and just to realize the depth of knowledge that's there, and building those relationships. That's what made it difficult to just jump ship and you stay longer, because it's not just about giving and just coming into change, but you build relationships in the space, which makes it something with keeping, and it's something that you want to keep and continuously build from it, using and utilizing, the resources and the assets from both sides. Because once you get into that space, you realize as a person, there's so much growth that you get from the experience, and there's so much that you learn in the process, and you just want to continue and continue. So yeah, that's what I found out in my experience.
Absolutely. I think this idea of unlearning, relearning, and moving forward in that learning process has become a bit of a buzzword. And so it's really nice to see a tangible example of where it's been so relevant in somebody's life. And I'm going to get into relationships a little bit later. I'm just going to let Sam introduce herself. Thanks for joining us. It's lovely to have our last panelist with us. Sam Ncula has been in several of our programs. Her biggest program has been the 910s program. And I think she was the leader Claire was referring to, who was Claire's leader when she was a student in the program. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself and what you're doing now. And yeah, what your community engagement experience was at Rhodes University. We can't hear you. No, we still can't hear you. Okay, a few minutes. Okay, sure. I'm going to pop back to you, Sesona, who spoke about relationships, and just a quick one about what do you think contributed to building those relationships and then obviously nurturing them, because they were obviously very central to your journey in community engagement, and perhaps even you can link it to your experience of how those relationship building skills are so important now.
And I think the important thing is coming into the space with an open mind, and just being open to get so much from the space, and then obviously, in how you build the relationships, you take a keen interest in understanding, because we're so quick sometimes to get into a relationship or get into a space and want to bring about the changes, but learning how they do things, how people within that space do things, how they want things. And then as you learn, then gradually getting in, joining how they do it. And then as you gain that experience and you build those relationships, coming with your ideas as well. So I think it's something that I learned, is to come into a space, not necessarily to try and change, but to learn from the people, engage with the people, listen first, and then, slowly start to bring in what you have to bring into the space as well. So I think that was something that was very important in terms of how I built relationships with the community partners and the people that I worked with. And even, in tutoring and mentoring, even with the students and or the learners, in trying to understand where they come from, how their lens of seeing things, because you get into a space and there's a way of doing things and there's a reason for doing things that way. And it's important to learn and understand and build from that. So I think in terms of establishing that foundation, establishing those relationships, that was something that worked very well for me. And it's something that I also used getting to the workspace, taking that time to understand the different perspectives, understand the different ways that the people think in, and, firstly, appreciate that. And then as you gain that relationship side and people start to, open up to you, then you can sort of bring in your ideas, how you see things, and make your contributions. So I think that's a very important thing that I learned from the relationship building while doing or while being an active citizen through community engagement during my time at university.
And from your perspective, do you think that this is something that comes intuitively and naturally to people, or is it something that can be taught? And if you think it's something that can be taught, how do you remember being taught this skill? So, what I'm hearing you say, it takes a level of humbleness and humility and openness and quite deep respect to build those relationships, which seem natural personality traits, but maybe not everybody has those when they come in as a young teenager fresh out of school. Do you remember having to teach that to somebody else, or how were you taught to cultivate that in yourself?
I remember back in the day, obviously there was, a very well-structured training that we received from Roos in terms of, the importance of building relationships and how to build relationships. So I think there was training that, took place, and it's a skill. Yes, it might come easier to other people or come more easily to other people than others. But I think it's something that can be learned. And it's something that I've also taught people along the way. When you're coming into spaces, coming in a respectful manner, with an open mind open to learning, and, a heart of humility, because that's how people open up to you, because you're coming into people's spaces and then they need to open up to you. So it is something that can be taught, or can be learned. And I think, our trainers, Roos, in terms of how they facilitated, even the philosophy behind, the being an engaged citizen, it did train most of that. And it's something that I do pass on even within my program, where it's different because it's, like interns at work, but training them how to build relationships within, the workspace as well. So that's something that can definitely be trained, I think.
Thanks for that, Sesona. One of the things you spoke about there was around philosophy, and one of the core philosophies that we really look into deeply in all of our programs, whether explicitly or implicitly, is Ubuntu, and what that means in theory, but more so in practice. And I wonder, Claire, just knowing a little bit about your background and, now being in Oxford in a super privileged space, and, you've had to navigate some very complex relationships, but you've nurtured relationships way beyond some programs that you've been part of. I wonder if you can speak to like how you have managed to think about Ubuntu in a modern perspective. I know this is going totally off script, but I trust that you have some insight into that.
No, the best conversations go off script. I think that's a good thing. And I'm sorry I dropped off very briefly, but hopefully I'm back and everyone can hear me. I want to actually pick up in answering this question on something Sesona said as I came back in. He spoke about the importance of humility, which I love. And I've recently fallen in love with this idea of relational humility. So we're humble in our relationships because we recognize that others may have knowledge where we are ignorant, and we can learn so much from them. And I think that in many ways is tied to Ubuntu. And I don't think I could define Ubuntu in a way that does its justice. So I'm going to leave that to another panelist or someone else in the audience. But I love that idea that we are so deeply connected to other people, and in so doing, we can grow so much through those relationships. I have had the fortune of encountering truly incredible people through community engagement, including a lot of my 9/10 mentees who have then gone on to become Rhodes University students from their high school years. And some of them also have gone on to become mentors in the program. So they in turn mentor other high school students. And it has been easy to maintain these relationships with them because these are relationships that I hope were built on principles of we're coming together, we both have these capabilities, and we're going to work towards something together. And so I've really appreciated being able to learn more about myself, to grow as a person in these relationships. And hopefully the people I've been in relationships with feel the same way about their relationships with me. This idea of mutually beneficial relationships, of the way we are deeply connected to each other, has been really important for me as I've gone to Oxford, because it's shown me a version of universities that can be grounded in context, and reminded me that universities aren't just these free-floating international spaces that they sometimes think they are. I mean, I arrived at Oxford with certain expectations, and the university is quite exceptional in some ways, but it also has a very difficult relationship with its own town in a way that I think threatens the university's own sustainability. And that for me really showed me the importance of engaging in community, being embedded in context as a way of ensuring that we can also maintain ourselves, that we also continue in what we are doing. So I think that would be my 2 cents on that specific question.
I mean, I know that the Oxford context is very, I mean, it's a student city, and much like Rhodes University is. And so you are inextricably bound in that context. And I think wherever we find ourselves as university, we are responsible for our surrounding community and our internal community. And I think that's a very good example of seeing that humility as an institution, but also as us as people, as individuals. So thanks for sharing that insight. I think a lot of this idea of humility raises one of the questions we had on the poster when we were advertising this around social justice and social responsibility, and how students come to understand the depth of those concepts and what social justice is and what our responsibility in society is. And I was just wondering, Monica, being in the health sector, so you obviously had experience in Budding Q, which is in the early childhood literacy sector. And the training in that program is quite extensive around the literacy crisis and how that's a social justice issue, and what our role is in making that or fostering a better society for our young children through literacy. But I wonder how those concepts of social justice and your understanding that you gained through the program has now translated to what you're doing in the health sector. I wonder if you could maybe speak a little bit about that.
I feel like it has impacted me greatly. I didn't think that an early childhood development program would enhance any of my skills after, my university degree. So in terms of health, we do quite a lot of ward rounds, and I think it's a very sad reality that in our hospitals there isn't much care towards our patients. And that is such a big social justice issue. And I feel that in terms of my contribution and what I have learned from that is that if we are able to work together as healthcare professionals, it's easier for us to actually work on social justice. But that's another issue on its own. So I feel that in terms of my contribution, I've been able to help patients to speak for them, and speak for them in terms of speaking to my other healthcare professionals. So we have patients that are not able to voice out their opinions because they feel like they're not heard. And I feel that in my context, I've been able to speak up for them, to help them in terms of their health journey, to be able to include them in their health journey as well. Because I feel most of the time we just give patients medication and we're like, okay, go out there, without hearing their opinion or what they want for themselves. And being involved in your own health is also a social justice contribute as well. So I feel that in terms of patients voicing out to me, I'm able to help them and contribute to their health as well. So I feel that I have a social responsibility of just working with others in terms of working with them and having some sort of medication interaction with them, and just working along with the patients as well as the doctors and the nurses for better therapeutic understanding as well, and journey as well. So I feel that us working together, and that's how it played out as well with working in Budding Q, working with other people, the communication as well really goes a long way in just incorporating that. So it definitely has played a big role in seeing everything, as well as the diversity part. So you see so many different people and you're like, oh, that's so crazy. And I've already dealt with that. And it really helped me in such a big way, because now I'm able to speak up for people as well. And it's also helped in my dispensing as well. I know incorporating this whole thing, like to Budding Q and everything, has been such a big thing to me. I saw your email and I was like, oh, how did I contribute to social justice? And I had to sit and think to myself. And I realized that I did such a whole lot that I didn't think was social justice, because I have had the certain idea of what social justice was, whereas in fact I was incorporating all of that. And in terms of health, it's so difficult, but one person at a time is better than just working on a whole big group of people. So I feel the patient that I can help in my dispensing, speaking out for them, helping them to be involved in their health journey is such an incredible thing. So I feel definitely I haven't really been able to work around the whole early childhood development, but I've been able to execute the ideas that were there into my career path now.
Mm. You raised two really interesting things around agency, connecting it to what Sesona was saying about how you have to really listen deeply and connect with what people want and advocate for them where they're not being heard. And you can only really do that when you truly understand something deeply. But what I also liked is this idea of the system. And I think a lot of young volunteers come into programs feeling like they're not, they're just dealing with one or two mentees, and like, what difference is that going to make? And then they end the year where they've been able to make such an impact in those children's lives or community partners' lives. And a lot of our discussions and reflections that we have throughout the year tries to see that whole ecosystem of a community, and not just in its geographical sense, but in the sense of connection. And I just wonder, Claire, I know you're doing a lot of research around community university partnerships and the system that makes that work. So, Sona, I know you have to deal with a million different people in your company. I wonder if either of you would like to just speak about how what you learned through your community engagement experiences, or what you're finding out now, really helped you think about the systems approach to changing society or changing your community.
I can jump in while I still have signal.
Yes,
I love this question, and I love the centering on social justice and systems, because I think often when we have these conversations about contributions of community engagement to careers, we think about employability, and we think about the labor market, and we think about marketable skills, which are important. And community engagement does contribute to those things, but it does so much more than that in terms of grounding in context, encouraging critical thinking, in terms of connecting different aspects of life. And I think what was really important for me is it enabled me to see problems beyond individuals existing in isolation. It created a space where we could see structures, but it also enabled me to question, why am I doing something, and how does it relate to all other aspects of my life, which have been really important in terms of encouraging me to see things holistically, kind of breaking beyond if we think about community university partnerships, what does it mean to challenge the boundary between community and university, and start to see a much more complicated system where there's a lot of porosity, there's a lot of fluidity in terms of identity, and where a lot of transformation can happen because of this really complicated space, at the same time as we acknowledge that there are structures that make it very difficult to enable positive transformation. And again, that calls on all of us as agents with capabilities to come together, because no one individual can do it alone, no one person, especially when you look at things in terms of deeper structures.
Absolutely. So, Sona, I don't know if you want to add some of your experience around systems and what you've learned and the context.
All right. Thanks, Anna. So in my context, there's a lot that I've learned that I've, tried to, sort of implement, and, sort of try and help in dismantling certain things within these complex systems by trying to understand people better and see how with everyday conversations that you have with people, for those focus groups where you have with people, trying to sort of you know engage and transfer, not transfer, but to sort of transform the way things are done, or transform or have an effect on the entire system that's there using these small spaces. And I think one of the things that I found important was to taking more time to understand individuals and focus on those relationships and understanding people for who they are. Because in our world where things are moving at a fast pace, it's about business, things are having to move, it's about getting things done and being efficient, we tend to forget about the important things. And we also, as people within the human capital or the HR space, we can be sort of tempted to see people as mere resources, and not as people. So taking that second, and moving away from that punitive side of dealing with people and treating them as resources that we can just use anyhow, moving to that deeper way of understanding them, taking that time not to just punish, but to also use that time to engage, train, understand, because you get to see that some of the issues that do present themselves at work are part of bigger structural systems and structural challenges within the society that we live in. So I think taking that skill from community engagement, where you understand people and you understand systems in a deeper way, I think I turn that and use it within my space, my human capital space, to get to understand people, even within the trainings, and not just train and be a facilitator, but also hear from people, because that's how behavior can actually change, is getting feedback and not just necessarily presenting. And by that, trying to influence the bigger system, which is also quite complex in its way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating, and all the answers of all the questions I've asked all of our panelists, it has always come back down to relationships and taking the time to build those relationships and really get to know people in the context, and not to rush or push and change structures immediately. To understand people's backgrounds and context has become really important to all of your professional lives. I'm going to pause right there just to let Sam introduce herself. But just before Sam introduces herself, if you have any questions, we're about 20 minutes away from trying to wrap up this conversation, and there's so many questions still to ask, but I'd like to see if there's any questions from our audience, our participants. If you want to just type your questions in the meeting chat, I'd really appreciate that, and I'll try and keep the conversation flowing as those questions come in, and try and include those questions as we talk, so we can keep the conversation going. So if you have questions for any of the panelists, either you can direct them straight to them by just saying who you would like to answer the question, or just ask your broad questions to the panelists in the chat function. So Sam, I hope we can hear you now, but it would be lovely to hear from you what you're currently doing and how your community engagement experience influenced the decision to do that, and what you're doing now, really.
Hi guys. Can you guys hear me now at least?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. It's so funny how like every time when I have to join something, I always end up having technical difficulties. I feel like my degree is being tested on a daily basis in my life. But yes, overall, you see now, for example, I don't even have my video on because
Don't
of that. But Yeah, but overall, hi everyone. My name is Samantha Ncula. I started at Rhodes in 2015 and I joined community engagement in 2016. Through to 2020, I was the student leader in 2018. I'm actually remembering all my dates and I'm proud of myself. And yeah, I got to be the student volunteer of the year in 2019. I was in the vice chancellor's 19th mentoring program when I started, and I also dabbled in some budding too. So that's my contribution as myself. And then what I'm doing now, I'm currently working for one of the biggest medical aid schemes in South Africa. I am not going to disclose who, but if my camera was working, I'm sure you guys are going to see the names around me somewhere. I'm currently based in PE and I also own a catering business as well this side. I've also that's giving me a nice headache, but I'm proud of it because it's my baby and I worked from it since last year. So that's me, guys, in a nutshell. I thoroughly apologize for missing out a lot, but the questions I'm also here to answer, y'all. I'm here to thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sam. I think what I really enjoy watching your journey is the entrepreneurial spirit that I would like to think has come from your community engagement experience and your leadership experience. I wonder if you can just speak a little bit about the connection, and I'm going to ask a few of you this, is the connection between your community engagement experience, how you were able to make sense of your academic experience in tandem, and how that's influenced the choices you've made for the careers you've made.
Oh, 100%. There's a beautiful link between the two, to be honest with you, because I've heard a few points from like Sesona and Claire and all. And I do agree that the relationship building thing does play a huge role in business because you're networking and you're building in I don't want to call it a relationship, but a network with people from that you probably think you wouldn't have met, to be honest with you, because I never knew I was gonna meet my mentees ever in my life, and I did. And thanks to the program, I've now actually learned how to handle emotions a bit better because we bounce off from each other, mentor to mentee, and you end up realizing that emotional intelligence plays a role as well, even in the workspace. Not only in the workspace, but also when you're building a when you're building a business. Because now, for example, if you get rejected here and here, you need to also understand that, okay, maybe this is not my time. I need to do A, B, C, D. I need to handle this a bit better. I need to go back to my learning. And also just to jump, I'm sorry for the noise, but also just to jump back from with education wise, like when it came to roads, I also learned a lot of different study techniques from my mentees, funny enough, because I had my way, they had their way, and were able to merge a way that was like beneficial for the both of us. Like, for example, I never liked reading, and I still not a big fan of reading. I'm an audio person. I like to visualize and watch. So I'm a more of a visual learner, and most of my mentees were reading. They learned better through reading. So we tried to merge the two, like, okay, let's do like a vision board, let's do a visual board, let's do this. And just to bring more different study styles into the mix. And I won't lie, it actually helped me a lot because when it came down to my thesis, I had to like sit and read and I'd be like, oh goodness, 67 pages of this, what's going on? And it's half of the things I wrote myself. So also that mindset going in there, I was like, okay, this is it. Also the learning techniques we had in the sessions and the study techniques rather, it was more like, okay, this is what we do in varsity, this is what you guys do in high school. So that merge also allowed them when they got to varsity to kind of like get an insight or kind of an understanding of how to handle multiple or multitudes of work in one setting, especially being independent on your own in varsity and stuff. So the mentoring sessions we had in their high school years played a big role even in their varsity years as well, because you could see it even when we communicate like, oh, thank you for this, like because of your the touch base of this and that, I was able to write my emails in this way or in that way. Or now I understand that the English structure in high school is completely different from varsity. So it works in both ways, if I put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. I should maybe just before, I see Claire looking like she wants to talk, but maybe just before Claire chips in about how she made sense of her community engagement experience and community and academia and now her decisions now. It's just important for the other participants to know that all the panelists here are not necessarily being involved in service learning, so the credit bearing course attached experience of community engagement. All the panelists have had experience in co-curricular community engagement where it happens alongside their academic journey. So Claire, I see you wanted to chat, and then I'm going to jump into some of the questions in the chat function.
Oh, no, you saw me getting excited because I was loving Sam's ideas. I was loving the questions in the chat. I think people are asking really important, exciting questions. So that was my look of excitement. So I will leave you to lead that, Anna.
Sure. Okay, well, maybe we can start with, there's a question here around some of the biggest frustrations and lessons that you've learned through your community engagement work. Is there anybody who's had a huge frustration that's been a learning curve that maybe they want to share?
I'll go with it.
Go for it.
I think Anna knows the frustration of not having volunteers pitch up to some of the sessions. And I think that was quite a big problem because you are in a bigger community with a lot of children that you're working with. And then it becomes a problem when you are alone and then there's like a huge bunch of kids and you have to like handle everyone. And it teaches you so much in terms of patience as well. And I think it plays out as well in the workplace as well. You have some people who know how to pull their weight, and then others who don't know how to pull their weight. And that's where it comes in as well, where you learn certain skills in your community engagement programs. And that builds up certain skills as well. So where you're able to communicate much better. You know, you're able to say, I don't like 1, 2, 3, and 4, or we could work around this. So you're able to have better problem solving skills as well. So you're able to incorporate that into your career path as well, and also your academics as well. I think that also played a big role in my academic journey as well. And I think there's also a thing of appreciating diversity as well as being able to engage respectively and have different viewpoints as well. That's definitely something that I learned quite a lot. I think being shielded in the environment that I grew up in as well. I think I came to Rhodes and I started off community engagement in 2020, and I was quite shielded by a lot of stuff, and I felt like there was just this bigger world that I was not even introduced to, and I gained so many skills in terms of diversity and being able to engage respectively with people and also understanding people's viewpoints. And I feel that has helped me immensely in the workplace as well. So yeah, I think that's definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely practice for real world context when you have to suddenly be flexible and adapt to people's needs and your own needs, and yeah, many challenges arise. And I think what we often speak about, often people speak about messiness. It's one of these buzzwords that float around at the moment. And I know some people won't agree with me by calling it mess. They want to call it complexity, but the mess is the joy of it, right? That is where the depth of the learning happens. It's mess is an opportunity, right? We do community engagement to try and understand the mess, to try and clean up the mess, to try and find people for our classroom to clean up together. And it's as Monica, you were saying, it's in that frustration when somebody doesn't pitch up, or somebody can't speak your language, or somebody didn't bring their work to their mentoring session, and you're just frustrated with their marks because they're not progressing like they should be in your eyes, that you can, as Sesona says, take the time to try and understand, to learn that person, to learn that context. And I think that's the richness of putting ourselves in these environments that aren't necessarily the same as our environments, where the learning happens because you're extended beyond your own bounds and what you already know. So I think that's a lovely practical example of frustration and complexity and messiness, but the opportunity that lies within that. There's another question here around how do we manage, so maybe I'll speak a little bit about the coordinator's perspective, but how do students and student leaders deal with the sensitive topics such as like the savior complex and I guess privilege and all these deep conversations that are coming up and much younger than undergrad actually. Claire, I'm going to throw this to you because you and I have actually developed material on this for high schoolers, but a lot of it also comes through in training that we get as students. How do we address and make these conversations accessible and comfortable? And maybe you could also speak a little bit about your TWIS that you do in Oxford as an idea. Go for it.
Yeah, this is a very, very good question. And my answer, in fact, relates to the earlier question too, because my biggest challenge in community engagement has been the fact that we hold so many single stories of groups that are different to us, so many assumptions of groups that are different to us. So that is the savior complex that I have fallen prey to when it comes to thinking about reaching out to communities. But I would say there are also assumptions and expectations that different groups have of universities or of other communities that they perceive as different to their own. So I loved Monica's point about diversity and multiple perspectives coming through in community engagement. I think it is a massive challenge, and I wish I had an easy answer to it. In our course, we start off with Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's Danger of a Single Story, which I think is a beautiful TED Talk resource for thinking about what it means to have certain assumptions of certain people. And after that, we go into having conversations about privilege and how we can use it as a concept, as well as how we think about our own identities and the identities of people around us. And this is a long process of relationship building that takes a lot of time, and I have found quite difficult, but incredibly rewarding. I think we can also think back to points that I heard Sesona and others say about the importance of listening. We think that we know how to listen, but I think community engagement teaches us how to listen properly, which I love. And also the significance of sharing our stories and hearing the stories of others. Just being able to create spaces where people are able to share stories and learn from other people's stories, I think has a lot more power than we give it credit for. So that would be my perspective, but I recognize how challenging it can still be to disrupt the assumptions that are embedded in many of our minds.
Absolutely. And I think that idea of being able to open up spaces to share multiple stories, I know one of the big cornerstones that as a coordinator I use to navigate these complex conversations is obviously mentorship. And it's all coming down to the relationships, but really spending time in small groups, in one-on-one groups. And I think we're very lucky at Roos to have that space, not to necessarily, I mean, we do a huge quantum of stuff in the engaged citizenry space, but it's not rushed. There are intentional spaces for reflection. There are intentional spaces for research and writing. And more we're starting to include students into that space. Many of these panelists, I think, have presented at community engagement conferences where they have shared their experience, and to have students on that platform with academics and community partners is really important. And I think one that for many years we've overlooked, to have the multiple voices, all stakeholders, present in reflections, and different size reflections as well. So everything from a student dropping into your office to speak about their week to planned reflection sessions with learners, students, teachers, coordinators, heck, even the vice chancellor sometimes, so we're very lucky to create those spaces that allow these discussions to happen. Sesona, I think you might be able to answer this next question best. We know that community is not a uniform concept. There's lots of different ways of thinking about it, but we've already spoken a little bit about how to navigate the complexity of those partnerships between community and university. But how do we understand within initiatives or within programs what is needed from the various role players and the support needed for different role players to enable good quality initiatives? So maybe you can speak a little bit about how you did that with Ncula and your tutoring experience, but also how you have learned from that experience into navigating, you're across multiple different communities, both in corporate and just general geographical communities. So maybe you could speak a little bit about that. How do we build together?
All right. So thanks, Anna, for that. And I think it will be, sort of repeating similar or sharing similar stuff time and time again. But I think within the context of, again, I'm going to emphasize relationships, it becomes easier and, not coming in with that idea that I am bringing about, development. I am, solving the issues for people, but getting to that point where we all present and we try to understand each other. And even in those those difficult times where there may be disagreement, because sometimes, they may be an over expectation, for example, of what the other party should bring to the table. So it happens. And I do remember as well, while involved in the Siakana at McCann program, and partnering up with those EC early childhood development centers. And then sometimes we would reach complexities and difficulties within, trying to understand or navigate certain things, because there would be expectations that, okay, this is what the students are bringing in from their side, and there'd be expectations that this is what the community partner is actually bringing in. So I think within those, building relationships and having that mutual respect, it's when you can actually, hear what the community actually wants, or what the community partner actually wants, or how they see things from their side. And then, you get to a point where you engage, have discussions, and then bring points respectfully if you disagree as well, because there can be also over expectancy that this is what we're supposed to bring to the table versus we're expecting that we're coming in to change, and this is how we want to see it. And I think also, just to touch on the earlier point, that's where some of the frustrations came about in some of my citizenry work during my time. And that's why I've learned now over time that, taking that time, understanding the other person, and then opening that room for effective dialogue, and then sharing respectfully if you disagree, raising your points respectfully without belittling anyone, because we've got different perspectives, and it's important that everyone comes with their different perspectives, and we help engage each other, and then show us the shortfalls of some of our views, and in a respectful manner. So I think it's something that I've not only used within that space, I've grown with it now, and it's something that I actually apply because there's quite conflicting views on many things, especially in the workplace. Diverse work settings. We see things differently, and it's always important to engage, have those dialogues, build those relationships so that you can engage more effectively and get a space where people can share freely without, fear that they'll be perceived in a certain way. So it's very important. So yeah, I hope I've covered it up.
Yes, no, I think I just want to add on to what you were saying around within those relationships. One of the part of the question was, right, how do you nurture what people need in relationships? And I mean, you spoke very much about openness, and within that openness and willingness to learn, I think a big part of that is around, firstly, generosity. Generosity from both sides, in the sense that, especially when there's a power imbalance to start the relationship off, I think what often breaks that, the scaredness or the intimidation of that power imbalance, is generosity and coming in and saying, look, we've noticed this about how amazing your community is, and we have this fantastic program that's worked in a different combination. How do you want to work it? But with that, with the generosity of being able to adapt and be flexible of what people need, is also the idea of deep listening and being connected to that community and not imposing on it. So creating enthusiasm from all sides. And I think, we've had experiences in our programs where community partners have dipped out of programs because the champion in that community partner hasn't been there to support all the role players, or and we've had to live and grow through those experiences, but it's definitely been a part of building and nurturing relationships that have made programs successful. So I'm sure, yes, go for it, Sam.
Yes. I just want to add one thing, Anna, just to what Sesona was pointing out earlier with the building within in the community, and to also just answer the savior complexes point. One thing that I've picked up when we go into the community and we start engaging with the students themselves, in my experience, guys, I'm not saying we all deal with students, but the students themselves, right? They talk, and that word of mouth is very crucial. So they will talk and be like, this is what my mentor has done for me, and this is what Ruth has done for me, etc., etc. And then that builds into the community. And after it building into the community, here's my snack lady. After building in the community, it ends up having, like, you end up having the teachers talking about it, and then it just spreads in the community, and then you'll find that a lot of people want to be in the program, they want to be partnered up, they want to experience all what we give. And I think also bridging that gap between what we are here for versus what is there and what we can both bring to the table really just does break that imbalance, or that lack of communication, that, or the lack of thinking and whatnot that is put out there. So yeah, I think I've just added that point
Also
for a bit.
contributes to building that mutual enthusiasm, and Claire and I always speak in our papers about mutual joy and how we create that mutual joy based on what people need, and making sure that everybody's passions and purpose is realized. So we only have 15 minutes to wrap this conversation up, which could go on all day. I'm going to ask each of you just to give your final statement, and I'd like you to just maybe think about these two questions. Is, if we want to build a better, more prosperous humanity and society, what do you think are the most critical skills, attitudes, knowledge, whatever you want to pitch, that we need to help people learn? So that's one. And then, do you think community engagement holds potential and opportunity for building a better society? So shall we start with you, Sam?
My pleasure. The skill that I would definitely say is needed is emotional intelligence. You need to obviously, not saying put your emotions aside or whatnot, but I think one of the I won't say one of the student leaders, I won't say one of the student leaders, but one of the colleagues did mention something with coming into a ground and you're being privileged and stuff like that. So emotional intelligence, not coming in there with that mentality of, oh, we're just gonna do this by way, you know what I mean? So, and also being able to communicate with someone who's a bit younger than you. I recall in all of our trainings, I'd be like, every time I'd walk into a room and I meet a new mentee, I'm like, listen, I'm your older sister. I'm not some privileged hand from Rhodes that's coming in to do ABCD. That's not what we're here for. I'm your older sister, I'm your older sibling. I'm here to tell you things that I didn't get to hear in high school and things that I didn't get to experience that I feel like you're gonna definitely benefit from this when you get into varsity and this is also gonna pave your career and whatnot. So that level of like understanding what you're walking into, and you're gonna meet someone new who's probably not in the same vibe as you, like just aura wise, but at the same time you want to make it comfortable for the both of you, because at the end of the day, that's gonna be like your little best friend up until the end of the program. Sometimes, again, in my case, it's your little best friend up until you're older and you're both in careers now and you're both talking and you both have still catching up. So it's a lifetime relationship that you have with the person. In my case, I still talk to all my mentees and I still have them on Facebook, Instagram, everything, we chat and whatnot. And
Yeah.
then yes, second point, I 100% agree that community engagement is very beneficial. I'm a walking example. We are all walking examples of it, to be honest with you. So it's 100% it's needed, because I was even shocked to find that some institutions don't have such programs. And this is like programs that I was telling my granddad, I want this to be implemented in small towns. I want this, I want that. And he said I'm starting to sound like a president, but he also agreed based on the experience that we've like that I would tell him on, like, and base
Yeah.
everything on, and he'd be like, yes, actually this is something that I fully agree that it should be done in all communities. So please,
Absolutely.
if anyone's out there that wants us to start a foundation, let's do the thing. I'm joking. But yeah, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what you said about self-knowledge and emotional intelligence. And that's definitely one of the skills we're seeing society needs more and more and more. Monica, I wonder if you would like to share what you think people need to build a more prosperous, successful humanity together.
I think there are a few skills actually, but I think one important one as well is adaptability. I think being able to navigate change and new challenges around you is very important in the community sector as well. And I think another thing would be critical analysis as well, and communication. I think one thing that we do as volunteers that's such a bad thing is that we assume what the community wants, whereas we need to communicate with them first on what they need. You know, it's like going to a community and being like, oh, they look like they need food, whereas they want to have a vegetable garden where you create jobs for them and they're able to be involved in their own community. So critical thinking, communication skills, adaptability, as well as appreciation for diversity. So being able to think logically, and being able to understand that people are from different backgrounds and you able to understand them and their viewpoints as well. And being able to just incorporate everyone's ideas into that, because this is community. So you're not just alone, but it's a whole bunch of people. And I feel like that's very important in being able to have a skill in. Um, Definitely, community engagement does have a big impact. I think it brings so much sense of hope to people. And I don't think people realize how much they are doing when they are helping someone. For example, yesterday I went to an orphanage, and just the little that you give to someone really goes a long way. And you bring such happiness to someone. And I think community engagement really brings hope and a sense of belonging to people as well, because sometimes people feel excluded from their communities. And I feel that if you as a community are able to like incorporate yourself as well, how the Budding Q program and most programs in Rhodes, they really, really help in terms of just incorporating everyone. So there's a sense of belonging for everyone. It's not that there's just a Rhodes community and then there's Makhanda, but there's Makhanda as a whole, where we are not just going there to study, but we're also there to give back to the community. So I feel definitely community engagement has grown so much and it can give so much to people, because I'm from UKZN, and that's another big thing that Samantha was talking about, that there aren't these programs in other universities. I was never exposed to that until I got to Rhodes. So it definitely does have a big impact.
Yeah, I love what you say about it's coming back to the systems and the relationships and really understanding the depth of that. And I know when a lot of new volunteers join programs, giving back is a cringe word for us. But as I watch and talk to you as a panel, it means something quite different after 4 years of an experience. It to me, it really captures the depth of learning and the depth that you've gained from community partners and the community. The commitment to want to do more and be better and collaborate deeply with society. So, and I think that goes back to the philosophy of Ubuntu, right? Is that deep connection. Sesona, I wonder if you want to share what you think what the biggest takeaway is about what we need to learn. I know it's going to be relationships, but maybe you can speak a bit more about that.
Yeah. Thank you, Anna. I think the most important thing is, and I think this is quite an important skill that people tend to not focus on, is it's actually listening, and listening to understand, and trying that effort to understand the other side. And quite often in society, we're so quick to make judgments, premature judgments sometimes, without fully understanding the other side or the multiple stories. And we carry these prejudices and these stereotypes that we make about the perceived needs, for example, versus the actual needs. What Monica was actually what she touched upon. And I think a lot of the time it's that thing that we're moving so quickly that we don't take that time to listen, and to not just only listen, to understand and see things from the other people's perspective. So I think that's one of the key things that we can start to put in practice. And a lot of other societal issues or challenges, I think, with that way of doing things, we could improve quite a lot, and we could improve humanity. And the relevance of community engagement, is it still relevant? Is there still a space for it? I think very much so, definitely, because it grounds you, it builds you holistically. It changes your perspective on a whole lot of different issues and views on society. And there's a lot of unlearning that takes place, learning new things, and relearning things that takes place in the process. And there's so much humanity that's cultivated in the process. For example, even in a professional setting where you're dealing with people, cultivating that humanity, and treating people, bringing that human factor, because that's been a primary driver within even my own, work experiences, of bringing that human back to, human capital or human resources. I don't even like the word resources when we talk about humans, but bring that humanity back to those HR practices. Because most of the time we're so quick, we're moving fast, that we forget that humanity element as people.
writing that down. Bringing humanity back needs time. I think that's profound. Thanks for sharing that. Claire, I'm going to let you say your final thoughts.
I will be brief because I think everyone else has captured these ideas so beautifully. In terms of skills, I think, and I'm going to pick up on your idea of generosity of both time, which has been a big theme, as well as spirit. This is something you have taught me, Anna. It's something Sam taught me when she was my student leader at 9/10, something multiple people have shown me. Related to relationship building is this idea of being able to have conversations and dialogue across difference. This means active listening, like what Sesona was saying. It means multiple perspectives and diversity, like what Monica was saying. It means cutting across all of the assumptions and trying to see the human underneath. In terms of potential and opportunity, I think community engagement has tremendous potential to create more empathetic, kinder people who care more about each other. And I truly believe that in so doing, we can transform the structures and the worlds around us. So I believe there is that opportunity. And it's, I think a question I would leave everyone with is how can universities orientate themselves to maximize that opportunity? What can they do to create spaces for these relationships to flourish, where the boundary between university and external community becomes a little bit more blurry? So that would be my final takeaway.
I'm very glad we ended with you, Claire, because that's a beautiful summary of what everyone said. And so, yeah, I think just, we started this conversation speaking about what Monica was saying about how her changed perception from coming in with this idea of I'm going to help, I'm going to give donations, to really a changed perception of how we work together and how we create a sense of belonging for people. And that comes from a broader experience, a deep experience of society through community engagement experiences. And then another aspect that really cut across the whole conversation, I think, was this idea of what Claire called relational humility, about relationships and how we need to humble ourselves and open ourselves to really deeply connecting with the people we work with, whichever community that is, and how we bring back that idea of care and kindness and generosity, of time and spirit and physical resources, I guess, to nurture those relationships, because that's ultimately what contributes to the sustainability and the motivation, and yeah, the human capability that we need in our society. And then also just thinking around the idea of self-knowledge and EQ, and how we often speak about graduate attributes as these soft or marketable skills that you learn as a byproduct of your university experience. But actually, community engagement seems to be doing something much more deeper, in the sense that it is creating purpose and passion, and direction for people, not just students, but within those relationships, as well as critical thinking and this idea of fostering emotional intelligence. And yeah, I think what stood out for me a lot is around this idea that these experiences that students negotiate are not easy experiences. They are heartwarming experiences many of the time, but they are complex, they're messy, they're challenging. But it's us as facilitators of those experiences that really create the richness to be able to learn. And Sesona started his opening section about unlearning. And I think that's the starting point, is realizing what your perception is about a community and your space in society, and how you, through these experiences, negotiate the challenges to become a fuller, richer contributor of society, responsible for our society. And that's really how we cultivate humanity. So I hope I have captured a little bit of at least what stood out for me in this conversation. And I'm sure we all heard different things in this conversation that will leave us thinking for a few days, and that's really the intention of a conversation like this. I'm incredibly grateful to all of our panelists for your deep insights and for sharing a perspective that often we don't really hear, as the students who are boots on the ground, trying to reach as many people as possible. So thank you for what you have done and what you're going to do in our society, and thanks for your lovely insights this afternoon. And thanks for everybody for joining us over your lunch break. We hope that you're leaving inspired and thinking about how to move community engagement forward for our students and our communities. Have a lovely afternoon wherever you are. Enjoy the rest of the week. Thanks, everybody.